Last week, out of the blue, I received a phone call. It was from a co-worker of one of our congregation's members, and this person is in seminary, and he wanted to ask me a few questions. I was a little surprised, but not much. I get calls like that a lot, and I figured it was someone probably interested in Unitarian Universalist ministry. Sure, I can talk, I said. What would you like to know? Without missing a beat, the person on the other end of the line, I will call him James, said, I would like to interview you about your thoughts on evangelicalism. I am a Baptist minister attending seminary, and my assignment is to interview someone who is not an evangelical about evangelicalism. I took a breath. This could go wrong in so many ways. It's always dangerous to make pronouncements about someone else's faith. And I also did not know this person, and I wondered if it was some sort of trap. Did he want to engage in a theological debate to try to convince me that his church had all the answers? I thought about it for just a minute, and then I said, okay, what's your first question? I will tell you in a bit, how that conversation went. But the conversation itself got me thinking about evangelicalism. Somewhat fortuitously, the Growing Together book group chose a book written by an evangelical for our all-church read. As many of you know, we are focusing on homelessness this year in terms of our efforts around social justice. The idea of an all-church read was to have a common reference point for better understanding the question of poverty and homelessness. Our book group chose 3 books for this task, which is so Unitarian, I think, being unable to decide on just one. But one of these books, the one that was written by an evangelical and from an evangelical perspective, was Under the Overpass by Mike Yankowski. The book describes a journey that is terrifying, heartfelt, compassionate, and really gritty. Mike decides at age 24 to live for half of a year as a homeless person. He leaves his upper middle class home with nothing but the clothes on his back and a sleeping bag. He travels from city to city, sleeping in shelters and on steps, begging for food, worrying about how he will survive. When he first broached this subject, the conversation around this project with his father, you can imagine what response he might have received. Why do you want to do that? His father asks. Mike responds that his reasons for doing it are complicated and perhaps hard to understand. I believe I must, he finally says. Mike is an evangelical Christian, and his reasons for taking the journey are deeply rooted in his faith. In one of the opening passages of the book, he describes his calling to renounce his life and to take this journey. This is what he says. The idea had dropped into my brain one Sunday morning while I sat in church. The pastor was delivering a powerful sermon about living the Christian life. The gist of it was, be the Christian that you say you are. Suddenly, I was shocked to realize that I had just driven 20 minutes past the world that needed me to be the Christian that I say I am, in order to hear a sermon entitled, Be the Christian That You Say You Are. Soon I would drive back past that same world to the privilege of my comfortable life on campus at a Christian college. Thinking ahead to my next week, I knew several things would happen. I knew I'd hear more lectures about being a caring person and a caring Christian. I'd read more books about who God is and what the world needs now. I'd spend more time late at night down at the coffee shop with my friends, kicking around ultimate questions and finally delivered opinions about the world. And then I'd jump into my warm bed and turn out the light. Another day gone. Mike continues, we are created to be and to do, not merely to discuss. The hypocrisy in my life troubled me. No, I wasn't in the grip of some rampant sin, but at the same time, for the life of me, I couldn't find a connecting thread of radical living obedience between what I said about my world and how I lived in it. Sure, I claimed that Jesus was my stronghold and my peace, my sustenance, my joy, but I did all of that from the safety and of my comfortable upper middle class life. I never really had to put my claims to the test. Mike thought about it some more and wondered what it would look like for him to live his faith in the world. He says, the picture that came with that question was of me being homeless and hungry on the streets of an American city. Hard on the heels of that idea came the questions. Could I really survive on the streets? How much did I really want to learn to be content always with nothing? What would my friends think? What would my parents think? My pastors, my professors, would I be okay? What if I got sick? What if I starved? What if I got beat up? What if I froze? What if I'm wrong? Am I crazy? Will I die? But already, Mike writes, I had decided. I walked out of the church that morning seized by a big idea, assaulted by dozens of questions, and sure that I had heard deep in my heart a still small voice saying, follow me. Follow me. So ends the passage. Now, I have to admit that I had a mixture of feelings at reading Under the Overpass. A part of me recoiled from the sometimes upbeat, certain, and cheerful theology that God is always present and ready to help. A part of me shied away from and maybe even questioned the task that Mike had set for himself, the task of traveling around with nothing. What exactly did he achieve by doing that rather than, say, advocating for the homeless at a more political level? But a bigger part of me deeply, deeply admires Mike Jankowski. I admire that he felt a calling that he couldn't refuse, to which he had to say yes. I admired his tradition, which gave him the strength and the justification and the internal resources to take such drastic measures in his life to help others. Most of all, I admire that he was willing to do something instead of just listening to another message on Sunday morning, as great as those can be, right? And thinking, that's nice, maybe one day. Now, William James is a famous psychologist of religion. In his book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, he outlines several different approaches to religion. These include dramatic renunciations, such as people who beat themselves and wear horsehair shirts. And they include varieties of religious experience that we might find more familiar, such as listening to an intellectual sermon or experiencing the beauty of a sunset. After hundreds of pages of analyzing different traditions, James asks which of these religious experiences is the best. Can they even be compared? His answer comes from his own perspective as a pragmatist. He says, the best experiences of religion are the ones that are the most useful. The best expressions are the ones that make the most positive difference in someone's life so that she can contribute generously and compassionately to the world that is around her. when I think about evangelical religion, what its value is, I'm drawn by this approach of William James. Does it inspire someone to live a more compassionate and generous life? Does it help someone make brave decisions for the good of others? The answer is that sometimes, yes, it does. For Mike Jankowski, it does. That is not always the case, of course. A minor news story this week is that the Benham brothers lost a reality television show because their fiery anti-gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender rhetoric was found out. They have repeatedly used their evangelical beliefs as a club against minorities. And they had the audacity this week to go on Fox and Friends and claim that gay and lesbian people were bullying them for their traditional beliefs. I believe it is quite the opposite. They dress up their hatred in religious drag, and they want to sound like heroes for it. Evangelicalism, along with most other traditions, does not always inspire a positive change in one's life. But this whole conversation is also not simply about the faith of others, but it's also about our own faith. What vision does our Unitarian Universalist faith inspire us to follow? Is it one of compassion and generosity for others, or is it a sometimes smug and judgmental attitude? The whole time I was reading Under the Overpass, these were the questions that came back to me again and again. What vision was my faith calling me to follow? I'm inspired by many of the things our congregation is currently doing, including starting a laundry ministry for the homeless and advocating at the city level for affordable housing. I encourage all of you who may not be involved in those efforts to think about getting involved. And maybe that's not the same as giving up everything and traveling around the country homeless for 6 months, but it's something. And for me, it does come right out of my faith as a Unitarian Universalist. The idea that everyone has inherent worth, whoever they are, and whatever circumstances they find themselves in, that is where I start theologically when I am wondering about how to meet the needs of the world. So what do you think of evangelicalism? James, the man at the other end of the line, asks me again. I did what I know how to do. I was honest. I talked about the beauty of its heartfelt worship and my admiration for the conviction it can inspire. I talked about the issues that we can partner on, including poverty issues and environmentalism that many evangelicals are now pursuing. And I also told him about the parts that I deeply disagree with, including some evangelical responses to reproductive rights and to equal marriage. James listened respectfully. He sometimes interjected and explained something, but never in an antagonistic way. It was a good conversation. At the end, he said, "You know, I was dreading making this call. I thought it would be a really unpleasant thing to do. But now I see why my seminary professor asked me to do it. I think I know a bit more about what your faith inspires you to do, and maybe you know a little bit more about mine." That's where the juice, the electricity, the purpose of these conversations live. It's about deepening our understanding of faith and what it inspires. And if that is more compassion and generosity in the wider world, if it helps us gain a greater focus and clarity about others and ourselves, then I hope for more conversations across the evangelical aisle. It's about what we can do today, finding the place where our faith can be life-giving and where it can make a difference. I'm reminded of a passage from the Psalms. It goes like this. This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life so that you and your children and your world may live. May it be so. Amen. I love you, and blessings on your journey.